and analytics. I'll just do that again. I'm Bret Greenstein, and I'm a partner with PwC, and I focus on data, analytics, and AI, and in particular, transforming clients with data as they're rethinking how they use data to make better decisions, how to improve transformation of their overall business, how to be more digital. And I suspect this talk will be a little bit different pace than some of the ones that you've seen in the last couple sessions. So we'll try to step back a little bit and focus more on what it means to help a company to embrace data, to innovate with AI ML, to build trust with data. And so this is going to be a little bit different than you might have seen before. And so with that, let me jump in right to this first part. The key point for anyone who's a data leader, whether you are the most junior data scientist, analyst, data engineer, data officer, or CIO,
I think you lost the connection, Bret.
Means to be data driven and how to trust those environments. Can you hear me clearly? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, we can hear now.
Okay, very good. So the growth in data going on right now is well documented, and companies are drowning in data. But nobody cares about the data unless it enables and informs better business decisions, better forecasting, pricing, hiring, supply chain decisions, things like that. And companies are not only drowning in the volume of data, but the new types of data, especially data types that are really well suited to AI ML. Unstructured data like images and video and text and voice and sound are very powerful tools now in making better decisions on how factories run, or how you provide customer service, or whether power lines or trees are intruding on power lines. You can use AI ML with this rich data to now make much better decisions. But most companies are not set up to do that. They don't have a good way of managing that kind of data. They don't know which data to use, and they really generally don't trust data. It's really strange. You would think it's just so intuitive. Everyone would trust data. But in reality, because people don't understand the systems that provide data, they have a significant distrust and really trust their gut instincts far more than they should. So turning data into decisions that your business can trust is the entire essence of our role, no matter what we do. And so in our roles as data leaders, we help our companies become more data driven. And that requires trust in us, in data, and the technology that supports it. So you are trusted. And I think about, because I think as leaders, it's required that people trust us. And I look back on trust, it's a very personal thing. It does come down to, the people that we most trusted earliest in our lives were our parents. We relied on them. They were on our side. They did things for our benefit. They explained things to us. They didn't tell us anything that wasn't true most of the time. And they maintained that trust over time through continued engagement and discussion and talking and educating. There's a lot of parallels for that in our roles as data leaders, especially since the technology of data, analytics, and AI is shifting from a very long-standing legacy base to a cloud-based approach with new techniques, certainly new techniques for AI ML, but even new techniques for managing data. And getting people comfortable with that is really, really tough. So if we think about this, we have to remember that our businesses that we work in need to trust us before they will trust the data, before they'll trust AI, before they'll trust cloud-based systems. And so it's up to us to use our skills and our understanding of the businesses we operate in and our understanding of new technology to be that bridge, to connect the unknown world that our parents introduced to us, that unknown world of cloud data, AI, ML, to a set of people who traditionally have looked at spreadsheets and made gut feel decisions. Just think about how new they are to this world and how much they need to learn. I was recently working with a chief data officer who already had the budget approved to go do a giant cloud data transformation. You would think his job was done. He got his money, got his budget, he picked his vendors, he was ready to go. He thought he had everything he needed, but he didn't understand the human element that goes into data. And there was enormous resistance that popped up as soon as they began introducing this new platform. people who were used to doing things a certain way, people who had tremendous familiarity and built their careers on the legacy data technologies, found a million reasons why the new stuff wouldn't work. And whenever something's new, it's not finished, which means it will have hiccups and issues and problems. And so that resistance movement stops the adoption of data. It creates distrust, and it can end careers. It could certainly limit a business's ability to use data for competitive advantage. So we helped him embrace the business stakeholders, the end users, the people who built their careers on the legacy technology, to embrace them, educate them, and get them to be advocates for the new direction. And it was really hard because he did it too late. He led with the tech, and he didn't embrace the end users and the human element that goes with it. So if you can recognize that trust starts with people, you can recognize that our role, even as technologists, is to establish and build that trust with the people we work with. So since all of the stuff we're talking about is based on technology, you can ask yourself, in the real world, what are the first technologies we trusted? And microwave ovens seem obvious. We cook with them. We don't even think about it. But when they first were introduced, it took a very long time for people to feel comfortable with it. It was better than the other ways of cooking. It was faster, it was cleaner, it was easier. But it was radiation, like it scared people. And there was a substantial amount of pushback on the use of microwave ovens early on. Even though it was better, it didn't matter. It created a fear and uncertainty and risk that made people hesitate. And the adoption curve was actually quite long. ATMs are even more surprising. ATMs were introduced in the early 70s. And generally, people had a personal relationship with their bank. They liked going in. They liked talking to a teller. If they didn't know what to do, someone would help them. It was a very high touch experience. The ATM, which is significantly more efficient from a banking perspective, more convenient because it's wherever you are, and generally worked really well, still met enormous resistance. The initial ones were not entirely reliable. There was a ton of fear that your money somehow was magically appearing. And what if someone took too much? What if someone took from your account? A lot of distrust around that. Early banks actually tried to make it even more personal. They would decorate ATMs. There was a bank that decorated their ATMs as clowns, which was kind of silly. There were other ATM and banks that would give away gift certificates for food and drink and other stuff to get people to use them. The banks wanted people to use them because it was lower cost of transaction. People were the issue. The technology worked, but the people were the issue. And so getting people comfortable with microwave ovens or ATMs or Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi terrified people for a long time. Certainly early internet access was all wired and complex and messy. Wi-Fi made it easier, but people weren't sure if it was secure. New data technologies are no different. They've been around for a while. We've been talking about cloud since the 60s. It really picked up in the 90s. Obviously, AWS in 2006 took off and has grown, and all of that has taken a much longer time than I think any of us thought it would. Now there are still companies that are nervous, but 100% of companies are moving towards cloud. They're all at a different pace. And as they adopt cloud, they adopt data on cloud. And then they unlock new forms of analytics and reporting and AI ML. And recognizing that cloud journey towards public cloud has taken some time helps you to realize even when something is better and more flexible and has all these positive attributes, there's fear. Right now, I think companies are outspending on cloud over on-prem. That took 20 years to get there, but now they're outspending it, and it's continuing to grow much faster, obviously. And most of our clients, and we survey them all the time, will say they're only about 20% of the way on their cloud adoption journey. So it'll happen quickly now because it's reached a tipping point, but there's still an enormous amount of change and adoption to go on. And cloud enables data. It enables the unlocking of silos of data and enables people to consume data at much greater, almost democratized level. Everyone in the enterprise will have access to data insights, in part because of the modernization of, as a result of cloud. Now, it's also important to recognize what technologies we don't trust yet. And they do relate to data. And so self-driving is one of those that's talked about quite often. Self-driving using AI to navigate a car without human intervention has been talked about forever. And the technology exists now to do it. And I would argue that Self-driving cars hold a lane better than most any driver I've ever seen, can stop better, more faster, more efficiently than people. But there's a human element that goes into driving and certainly into safety. If a self-driving car causes an accident for any reason, even if it's not the car's fault, if self-driving was involved, we have zero tolerance for that. But self-driving cars are not distracted. They have cameras all the way around looking 360 every millisecond or whatever the frequency is all the time. And the algorithms get better all the time. And so there's a point where it would be stupid to drive if AI could drive better than you. But we still allow, I think it's 37,000 distracted driving accidents in the United States every year. And how many self-driving accidents occur in a year? If one happens, it's in the news. We have a disproportionate fear of the downside risk, and we undervalue the upside risk when something is still very new. So even if it's safer, even if it's better, the downside risk scares us more, and it takes a long time until you get past that. And it's the reality of how people react to technology. Bitcoin is quite similar. Bitcoin is, transparent, immutable record of all transactions. It's decentralized. You would think this would be the perfect way to handle all money. And yet I don't know a single person who's taken their entire 401k and put it into Bitcoin. The problem is that the volatility, the news stories of any, hacking or theft or anything that does occur has a disproportionately weighted bias for people in fear. When you're talking about human safety and money, these are very personal things. So we overweight the disproportionately scary stuff against the potential benefits. Now, there will be a point where things stabilize and safety of your money and safety of lives becomes so apparent that not using them would be irresponsible. However, there's a lot to get over to get us there. Nuclear power has also gone through its own journey, cleaner, less impact on the environment. And yet it's been stopped in many places because the downside risks, which are very visible and famous, terrify us. And so we resist these technologies. Now with data on cloud, there is still risk. Public cloud has risk. Public cloud goes down. Data, once you take it out of its silos and unlock it on cloud, requires improved security models, better governance. And as you start to tip your business to making decisions based on forecast models and AI/ML and data, you now have to know, are those decisions right? Was the data properly managed? A bad decision can have a scaled effect. And so there is still a lot of fear. And this is what we have to deal with as professionals to help people understand it better. Now, the tech is not the challenge. Despite all those things I just talked about, the fears and the risks, it's not technology that's the issue. It's the understanding of technology. So most CIOs and chief data officers think about tech all day, from first thing in the morning to the end of the day, because it is the nature and the rhythm of their job. It's what they think about a lot. And it's easier for most of us who are generally technical people. But the technology has gotten so good that it is rarely the bottleneck on a transformation. So as a company tries to embrace a data-driven approach and use more AI, for example, and data science, they suddenly realize that tech is not the bottleneck at all. The advantages and the investments and the innovation that have gone into the hyperscaler clouds have improved things a lot. And self-service reporting is awesome. The visualizations people generate in data are amazing. There's nothing like it, in the last 40 years. So we have to help people to trust the data. We have to recognize that when you're presenting somebody with a decision built on a model with data, that we have to help them feel comfortable to trust that. Now, when people are not ready. When people show up in a meeting with spreadsheets to try to convince you that they're doing well or the problem is not them, there's a problem. That is an issue. That's a sign of a lack of trust in data. You're not trusting the systems, and you spend your entire meeting explaining your spreadsheet. How is it structured that way? What do the columns mean? Is the data right? Did you miss any data? Is your model right? How do I know your model's right? We spend all this time trying to credentialize and explain what we're presenting because we're not using the systems that actually have the data. And we're not using really good forecast models and are able to explain, forecast accuracy and confidence levels and causality and bias. We can't talk about those things yet enough. And so businesses will rely on these ad hoc analysis on spreadsheets and make really important decisions. in a very competitive set of markets, based on basically hand-coded algorithms that are basically straight lines through dots on pages. It's not the thoughtful data-driven approach that people want. So we have to help them understand how to trust the system, how to establish data governance so they know that the data they're getting is complete, it's right, it's current, they understand the lineage. And then when you build a model off of that data, you have to be able to explain the confidence of the model, the accuracy of the model, the bias that might be inherent in some of the data sets. You really have to be able to bring that to life, because ultimately it's still people making decisions. They're now making an informed decision because this model says there is a 94% chance that prices are going to go up in 2 weeks. And when they do, our sales volumes are going to go down and we have to make a decision. It doesn't say absolutely that will happen, but it tells you with confidence this is what will happen. Before that, somebody showed up with a spreadsheet and tried to convince you to do what they wanted you to do instead of using the data to help you decide what to do. So it's really a very, very different mindset. The other thing that you'll notice is when you're in a data-centric environment, the data does not flow from person to person to person through email and spreadsheets and shared drives. It gets everyone at the same time. We all get the same data. So the day that revenue drops in one of your stores or your factories, the day that happens, everyone should know that. It's not a secret. The real value in data is understanding why it changed and what to do about it. And hopefully having seen it in advance so you are prepared for it by using forecasting models. No one should ever be surprised by data unless it's a sudden event. An earthquake is a surprise, although there's forecast models for that. But generally speaking, there are acts of God kind of sudden things, but almost everything else is some degree of predictability. And so it's up to us as data practitioners to build predictive models, to look ahead and make sure that when the data for the revenue for the store does come out, it's not a surprise. We actually know it's going to go that way. We already know why it's going to go that way because we looked at the causal data. And we have recommendations on the types of actions we could take and probably modeled what will happen when we take them. So it's a very different way of thinking. And the businesses that do this are not gated by people moving data. In some cases, the data obviously moves by itself. Even some of the recommendations and decisions are happening by themselves. And they're operating at the speed of data, not the speed of people. So it's obviously important to recognize that the trust starts with you, and that as a data professional, it is up to us to bring that trust. And we can blame the leaders of any business for not being data-driven and for using those spreadsheets. But it's unfair because they came up through the business, they became those leaders after 30 or 40 years of handwritten spreadsheets and tables and charts and gut feel reactions. And it worked to a point, but we're now at a hyper-competitive world where a little bit more insight, a little bit better decision is a significant competitive advantage. My grandfather ran a factory a long time ago in New Jersey, and he had this room with these mechanical calculators and big ledgers, and all the data was there. And I was fascinated by the machines that ran business. And when you look at it, those things were just spreadsheets before there were spreadsheets. And it just people putting numbers on charts in cells and looking at them and then building very basic models off of it. And when something bad happened, what he did is the same thing people do now, which is they have a big meeting, they look at the chart, they see something is red. They're like, oh my God, it's red. Why is it red? And they ask people, and then everyone tries to come up with a few hypotheses, and they ask them to come back in a week and tell me why it's red. And what are we going to do about it? But in a data-driven business, we already know it's red before it gets red because the forecast says it's moving that way. There's a 94% chance it's going to be red, a 99% chance it's going to be red, days or weeks in advance. And you've already built those hypotheses. And when you come to the meeting, you've got models that say, if we do this, this is how much better it could be. That is a data-driven business. It's a very different mindset and one that our leaders are not accustomed to. But when they are introduced to it, when it's explained in non-technical terms, how to operate that way and how to use confidence levels to their advantage. A 94% confidence level does not mean something is not good. But when you ask people, should I do this? They always say, absolutely. They pretend it's either 100% confidence or zero. It's either right or it's wrong. But when you're building forecast models, there is uncertainty, and you have to help leaders understand how to use that uncertainty to their advantage. I would take 51% odds over 49% odds anytime. But to most business leaders, 51% certainty sounds pretty bad. But it's actually pretty good because it means on average, you're going to win on average. So as leaders, it's up to us to help them bridge that gap. And it comes through, having a clear data strategy, inspiring people, educating people, taking the time to engage. It's really important to drive this culture to focus on literacy. One of the clients I was working with was trying to explain data literacy, and they thought, if I just teach people how a database works or a data warehouse or an extract or any of these things, if I just teach them the mechanics of it, they will come to the right conclusion. They will understand what I know. And the reality is, as a IT or data person, you need to know all that stuff. Your users don't, but they do need to know about how to use data well. And so data literacy is not about understanding the technical architecture of your data environment. It's understanding about what the data means, the quality of the data, how much you should trust that data, the models that are built off of that data. So those are things that you should do as a leader and as a data expert. So start with the business. Make sure that anything you're doing is business first. Now, the way to do that is to engage business users and talk to them about the types of reports, the types of insights, the types of decisions they have to make, and then design data systems and models to support that. Now, a lot of times that sounds so obvious, and yet a lot of times people really start with, here's the data I have. What can I model? And then you just let technical people come up with hypotheses and just create stuff. But practically speaking, a lot of times the data you have is not the data you need. And if you start with the data you have as your constraint, you only end up with answers to problems that may not matter to your business users. But you ask the business users what they want to know. They may actually really want to know, what are my customers buying instead of my stuff? Well, there's no data in your system that will tell you that. Your data tells you what they bought, how much they bought, how much they paid, and when they called you for customer service. You only know what they did with you, but most business users actually want to know what they didn't do with you. And there's external and third-party data you can use to draw tons of conclusions about that. That is powerful insight. That comes from the business side, and then it drives the data teams to go bring together more data to be more valuable. Now, once you bring all that data together, you've got to deliver a responsible environment. So you've got to have data governance, not on all data, but there is data that's going to be more critical to your business, more essential, and must be governed in a way that you understand the quality, the completeness, the gaps, the lineage of that data. And there are certain data sets that have to be managed that way. Also, as a data leader, you are not just accountable for the cost of the IT environment that runs the data. You're accountable for quality of data that will ultimately drive decisions. So it is terrifying, but also empowering to know that you're now measured really much more on business outcomes than you are on the up-down time of a database. And it's a very different thought. It sounds scary, but by engaging with the business, you're really enabling them to know with much greater precision and accuracy what is going on. And if your data is wrong, poorly managed, poorly governed, it will cause problems. But the alternative is a lack of data causes blind spots, which causes much worse decisions. So when you measure yourself that way, you just have to think of yourself in a very different role and a very different light. So when you've done this well, you will see an environment where trust starts to show in a lot of ways. It'll begin with end users outside of your team beginning to innovate with data. They will curate data. They will bring in external data, additional data. They begin to share data with each other in much better ways, breaking down the silos that exist in the enterprise. They'll begin pushing for new innovative technologies, getting rid of legacy data warehouses, moving to more of a data fabric for the enterprise. They'll certainly be innovating in data science, driving consumption of data. And what you'll often find is when you have a thriving data culture, the data scientists, the AI and ML experts in your business will demand more data. They will challenge you to bring more of that external data that you don't have. And then as you bring more data, you will enable more innovation. You create a virtuous cycle of greater insights means more data enables greater insights. And you become a really, truly data-driven engine for competitive advantage. And people in meetings will stop asking what happened and, how, are we red or green? They will focus so much more on knowing what will happen. Forecast models, predictive models, confidence levels, these will become the dialogue of meetings. People will be much more interested on predictive analytics, and even more so, prescriptive models. Not just will the revenue go up or down, but what should I do based on simulation and based on prescriptive analytics? What should I do to get the best outcome? If I do this, there's a 3 times greater chance my revenue will go up. If I do nothing, there's a 3 times chance my revenue will go down. Knowing those things makes business leaders make significantly better decisions. So keep in mind that as data people, we can love data, we can talk about data architectures and models and technology all day long. Just remember and appreciate that the reason we exist and the reason we're doing this is to help turn that data into much better decisions for our customers. We're certainly at a time when people who love data have probably never had a moment like this, where it is so critical to the world, certainly so critical to most businesses. It's appreciated, it's valued. Cloud has accelerated it. It's the perfect time to be, in this space. And businesses are hungry for answers on how to do these better decisions. So I think it's really just up to us to make sure that we're engaged in enabling and passionate about the topic and the impact and benefit that data can have. So to get started, I always think about the story that the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, and the second best time is right now. And it's really true here as well. It would have been nice if we all started on some of these techniques and technologies and approaches 10 years ago. However, it's still early in this game, and businesses are still very early in their adoption. They are looking for leadership. They're looking for people who really understand how to do this. And so the second best time really is right now. It's a really good time to help your leaders, your CIOs, your chief data officers, your business leaders, to establish a data vision. Think about what your competitors, the other companies in your industry, are doing with data, and how much more effective you could be if you could see a little bit further ahead, make better decisions, predict better, get to prescriptive analytics. Absolutely engage your stakeholders, not just the IT team, but the people who consume data, the data scientists who are emerging all over the business. They're popping up everywhere. Help them, engage with them, talk to them. You'll find they have ideas that you didn't think of, sources of data you would have never considered. And it really stretches you to think about enterprise data not as the stuff coming out of SAP or other transactional systems, but all the data that actually matters to making decisions about how to price, how to win customers, how to keep customers, how to make your products work better, all of those things. You'll do that through constant education and inspiration. And it's not easy for technologists to, talk in inspiring ways and tell stories, but it's a skill that is highly valued. And those people who are deeply technical, people who can code in Python, but also talk in business language, they will be, incredibly valued everywhere. And so I strongly encourage you to exercise all those skills and really focus on enabling innovation. Data-driven businesses are already substantially better than others. We survey this all the time. The companies that are early adopters of this, the companies that have gotten further on their data-driven culture, getting substantially better market share, market valuation, ability to attract talent, better products. They are better across the board because they're driven by data, so they're making better informed decisions. And so I just ask you to recognize that these are the steps that any one of us can take. And we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be moving in this direction. And this is absolutely how data-driven enterprises are born. So with that, I will thank you and open up if there are any questions I would welcome.